Right now, high above the city of Cusco, there's a tunnel that no one is allowed to walk into. It runs beneath the great stone fortress the Inca built, the same people who raised Machu Picchu, and it's been sealed shut for more than 100 years. 3 questions have hung over it the whole time. What's actually down there? Why did they wall it up and refuse to reopen it? And why, this year, are archaeologists standing on top of it, waiting for permission to dig? We can answer one of them right now, and it's grim. The last people who walked into that tunnel never walked back out. 3 boys got lost in the dark and starved before anyone reached them. An American explorer wrote it down in 1877, and soon after, the prefect of Cusco had the entrances walled shut. What the radar just picked up running more than a mile beneath the city, and what's still sealed inside those passages, we'll uncover in the next few minutes. Start with where we're standing. Sacsayhuaman sits on a hill above Cusco at about 3,700 meters, high enough that the air is thin and the clouds move fast over the walls. And the walls are the first thing that stops you. They run in 3 long tiers of zigzag stone, the biggest of them stretching for roughly 400 meters. Some of the blocks in the lowest wall are the size of a small house. The largest are estimated to weigh somewhere between 120 and 200 tons. Nobody has put a modern scale under them, so those are estimates. But even the low end is heavier than a blue whale. Now here's the part that gets under people's skin. These blocks aren't cut into neat rectangles like bricks. Each one has its own shape, with as many as 12 angled faces, and every face is carved to lock against the stone beside it. With no mortar and no cement, the Spanish soldiers who saw it in the 1500s wrote that you couldn't slide the blade of a knife between the joints. And if you go there today, you still can't. Engineers who've studied those seams admit the fit is tighter than a lot of what we build now, and it has survived earthquakes that flattened the colonial churches around it. That isn't luck. The walls lean slightly inward. The doorways are wider at the bottom than the top, and when the ground shakes, the stones shift and settle back instead of cracking apart. Whoever designed this understood the mountain they were building on. For a long time, the story was simple. The Inca built it, sometime in the 1400s, under the Emperor Pachacuti and the rulers who came after him. Spanish chroniclers wrote that around 20,000 workers labored here for the better part of a century, quarrying, hauling, and setting the stone. That's the version in the textbooks. But the ground under Sacsayhuaman has been telling a slightly older story. Carbon dating and excavation point to building on this hilltop as far back as around the year 1100, centuries before the empire we usually picture. That earlier culture is called the Quilca. Luis Lumbreras, the Peruvian archaeologist who once ran the country's National Culture Institute, confirmed Quilca construction here in the 1100s. And in 2008, a dig uncovered an 11-room temple complex from that period. So the honest answer to who built this is layered. People were shaping this hill long before the Inca finished it. Not a lost race from 12,000 years ago, the way you'll hear online, but real cultures, one building on top of the last. This fortress had one more famous chapter before the tunnels took over its story. In 1536, a few years after the Spanish seized Cusco, the Inca ruler Manco Inca led a massive revolt and laid siege to the city. Tens of thousands of Inca warriors captured Sacsayhuaman and used its towers to rain fire down on the Spanish below. The fighting for these walls was some of the bloodiest of the entire conquest. During one desperate assault, Juan Pizarro, the brother of the man who conquered Peru, was hit in the head by a stone thrown from the fortress and died of the wound a few days later. And according to Cusco tradition, when the defenders finally lost the towers, one of their commanders, remembered by the name Cahuida, chose to leap from the highest wall rather than be taken alive. The Spanish took Sacsayhuaman in the end, then spent the next few centuries hauling most of it away for building stone. Only about 1/5 of the original complex is still standing. But the one part no siege and no demolition ever reached was underground. And the passages down there aren't just a rumor that started on the internet, whatever the debunkers say. They're in the written record, going back to the people who were actually there. Garcilaso de la Vega grew up in Cusco in the 1500s, the son of a Spanish captain and an Inca noblewoman. In his History of the Incas, published in 1609, he describes an underground labyrinth beneath the towers of the fortress, a network of passages and matching doorways so confusing that no one dared go in without tying a cord at the entrance to find their way back. He wrote that as a boy, he and his friends played in the outer galleries and never had the nerve to go past where the daylight reached. He wasn't the only one. Around 1590, the chronicler Martin de Murua described a temple in the fortress with an entrance shaped like an open serpent's mouth, and said you could go down from there toward the Temple of the Sun through a maze of caves. And in 1594, an anonymous Spanish priest wrote something more specific. He said a main tunnel began at the Coricancha, the Sun Temple in the center of Cusco, ran underground beneath the bishop's house behind the cathedral, and ended about a mile away at the fortress of Sacsayhuaman. Read that again. More than 400 years ago, someone wrote down that there was a tunnel connecting the two most sacred places in the Inca capital. Whether they walked it themselves or repeated a story, we don't know. But it's on paper, and it's old. So if the passages are real, why can't anyone go in? Because people kept dying in them. The clearest account we have comes from an American named Ephraim George Squire, a diplomat and explorer who traveled through Peru and published his findings in 1877. He wrote that the deeper branches of the labyrinth could no longer be followed because a general named San Roma, when he was prefect of Cusco, had ordered some of the passages walled up. The reason was a string of accidents. The last one, he wrote, happened to 3 boys who wandered in, got lost, and starved to death somewhere in the recesses of the tunnel before anyone could find them. That's the documented core of it. A local official, sometime around 1841, sealing the entrances after children died in the dark. It helps to know there are actually 2 of these caves at the site. There's a small one, the Chincana Chica, that you can still walk into today, a short, natural tunnel with Inca carvings that brings you out the other side in a couple of minutes. And then there's the big one, the Chincana Grande, the deep labyrinth the chronicles describe. That's the one that's roped off, the one people got lost in, and the one nobody has been allowed to fully explore in living memory. And then there's the part that lives somewhere between history and legend. The story goes that a man once went into the Great Tunnel, the one they call the Chincana Grande, and vanished. Days later, or weeks later, depending on who's telling it, he came stumbling up through the floor of the Santo Domingo convent, the church the Spanish built directly on top of the old Sun Temple. He was starving, half out of his mind, and clutching a bar of gold, or in the Cusco version, a solid ear of corn made of gold. He died soon after, and could never explain where he'd been. Is that true? Almost certainly not as told. The earliest written version we have comes from an explorer in 1927, and it's grown in the retelling ever since. But here's what's interesting. The legend and that priest from 1594 point at the exact same place. Both say the tunnel ends at the Sun Temple, under the church, in the heart of Cusco. If a sealed tunnel under a fortress the Spanish couldn't tear down is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, take a second and subscribe. This channel goes where the record and the official story don't line up, and there's a new one every couple of days. Now, because this is where it stops being history and starts being current. People have tried to prove the tunnel is real, and at least once, it went badly. Between 2000 and 2003, a team got permission to run ground-penetrating radar under the Santo Domingo convent, right where the legend says the tunnel comes out. They claimed the readings showed chambers and passages beneath the church. Then, in August 2003, the project was shut down. The Peruvian press turned on it, called the whole thing a hoax, and no entrance was ever opened. Whatever the radar saw, or didn't see, the digging stopped, and the story went quiet for years. You can read that two ways. Either there was nothing there, and it collapsed under its own weight, or someone decided that cutting a hole in the floor of a colonial church, sitting on the holiest site in the Inca world, simply was not going to happen. The people who grew up in Cusco tend to have their own version. They'll tell you everyone in the city knows the tunnels are there, that families have gone in through cellars and old doorways for generations, and that the only people who insist there's nothing to see are the ones in charge of the site. We're not going to tell you which reading is right. We're just going to keep laying out what's on the record. Because in 2024, a different team went digging at Sacsayhuaman itself, and what they pulled out of the ground was strange enough to change how you look at those walls. It was a 3-year project run jointly by Peru's Ministry of Culture in Cusco and the University of Warsaw in Poland, with dozens of archaeologists, historians, and architects. One of the leads was Alexei Vranich, who spent years mapping Andean sites in 3D with laser scanning. Over the summer, the team opened careful trenches around the base of the Great Towers and the zigzag walls. They found fragments of Inca war clubs. They found pigment in white, red, blue, and yellow, which means these gray stones were once painted in color. And they found teeth. Thousands of them. Some belonged to monkeys, some to jaguars, but most of them were human, and many had been drilled straight through the root, as if they'd been strung together and worn. Sit with that for a second. Whoever gathered behind these walls wasn't only storing grain and weapons. They were doing something with thousands of human teeth. By some counts, the dig turned up close to 19,000 of them, pulled, sorted, and pierced, most likely worn as ornaments or kept as trophies. It's the kind of detail that quietly rewrites what you thought a place like this was for. That dig wasn't hunting for the tunnel, and it didn't claim to find it. But it's a reminder of a simple fact. We are still, right now, pulling things out of the dirt at this site that nobody expected. The place is not finished telling us what it is. Which brings us to what's happening this year. In January 2025, at a press conference in Cusco, 2 Peruvian archaeologists, Jorge Calero Flores and Mildred Fernandez Palomino, announced that they'd been surveying the ground between the Coricancha and Sacsayhuaman with radar and sound equipment. And they said the readings lined up with what the chroniclers described 4 centuries ago. Beneath the streets of Cusco, roughly 1 to 2.5 meters down, they traced what looked like a main passage running about 1,750 meters, a little over a mile, from the Sun Temple up toward the fortress, plus 3 branches heading off in other directions. Calero described the cavity as roughly 1 meter to 2.5 meters wide, and about 1.5 meters tall. Big enough, he said, that an Inca ruler could have been carried through it on a litter. Later surveys used a second method, electrical resistivity, that hinted at cavities even deeper down, and the team has spoken about far more underground galleries than just that one passage. On paper, it's the most detailed case anyone has ever put together that the tunnel is really down there. Now the honest part, because this is where a lot of channels lie to you. Nobody has walked this tunnel. Nobody has dug into it. What the equipment found is an anomaly, an empty-looking space under the ground, detected by radar and not yet confirmed by a single shovel. It hasn't been published in a scientific journal. It was announced to the press. Radar can be fooled by natural cracks and old drainage, and this could still turn out to be exactly that. The team knows it, which is why they've asked the Ministry of Culture for permission to dig at a few key points, and physically go inside. As of the most recent reporting, that permission still hasn't come through, and no one has been in. So the map exists. The tunnel a priest described in 1594 now has a radar signature in 2025. And there's a team standing over it with the equipment ready, waiting for a government office to say yes. Which leaves the oldest question of all, the one people really come here to ask. If the Inca and the cultures before them could carve 200-ton blocks so precisely that a knife won't fit the seam, move them across mountains without wheels or iron, and thread tunnels a mile through solid rock, how did they actually do it? You've heard the wild answers, that they had a plant or a liquid that softened stone like clay, that the cuts are too clean for hand tools, so it had to be machines or lasers, that a lost super civilization did it 12,000 years ago, or that it wasn't human at all. Here's where we're going to be straight with you, because aliens built it is the easy exit, and the walls themselves argue against it. Look closely under low, raking light, and the stone is covered in thousands of tiny impact marks. Those are the fingerprints of hammerstones, harder rocks used to pound and shape the softer blocks, grinding them down with sand and water, and an almost unbelievable amount of patient labor. There's no melted glass from a laser. There's no trace of a stone softening chemical anywhere on them, just marks left by hands. Architects have even rebuilt the ramp and lever methods that could drag and raise these stones, and shown that they work. So could there be more to it? The exact way they maneuvered the very largest blocks is genuinely still argued about, even among mainstream archaeologists. That's a real open question, and we're not going to pretend it's closed. But the honest version of the mystery is almost more unsettling than the alien one. Human beings with rope and stone and generations of stacked up skill built something we still can't fully explain how they finished. And we find that so hard to believe that a lot of us would rather hand the credit to someone from the stars. So we come back to the sealed door in the hillside. We know the passages are real, at least the ones people have walked and died in. We know the chronicles, 400 years old, describe a tunnel running to the Sun Temple. We know a general walled it shut after 3 children never came out. We know the radar, this year, traced a mile-long space under the city that matches the old story almost exactly. And we know a team is standing over it right now, waiting for permission to dig. What we don't know is what's at the other end, whether it's a natural crack, an escape route, a path for a god-king carried on gold, or a chamber the Inca sealed on purpose before the Spanish ever set foot in Cusco. For now, it stays exactly where it's been for over a century. In the dark, under the stone, one government signature away from being opened. Some doors get sealed because there's nothing behind them. Others get sealed because of what is. If you want the other half of this puzzle, the discovery under Machu Picchu itself that Peru still can't explain, that's the video on screen right now. We'll see you there.